What was the secret war of the Three Emperors? One which brought a cataclysmic end to the Golden Age of the Sith Empire. The old Sith Empire is a time that is not well known, and is an era what happened sometime after a Junta Pao, and the Dark Jedi established themselves as the rulers of Korriban. Within the next 1,000 years that ensued afterwards, one of their descendants, Marka Ragnos, would arise as the Dark Lord of the Sith. He would lead a conquest throughout the Outer Rim that brought the Sith to their Golden Age. No being under his rule lacked for anything so long as they were obedient. The Sith Lords were fabulously wealthy, and all of those of the Sith species enjoyed a life of luxury and unprecedented prosperity. But what happened after Marka Ragnos died, ushering in a political scuffle that would tear the Golden Empire to pieces, and ultimately raze it to the ground? Our three would-be emperors were Naga Sadow, Ludo Kresh, and Tenebrae, with a more famous name for Tenebrae being Darth Vitiate. In actuality though, only one of these men held the favor of Marka Ragnos, and only one of them would be the heir to the Sith. Today we are going to be taking a look at the destruction of the old empire from a completely different perspective, which is the one that Darth Vitiate saw. So join us as we open an ancient holocron and dive into the Machiavellian political world that saw the end of the old Sith Empire. 5,100 years before the Battle of Yavin, our story begins with a 13-year-old Vitiate, who at the time was named Tenebrae. Tenebrae was originally born on the Sith world of Medrias. Tenebrae was born from a cheating mother, and in secret, he was the spawn of another Dark Lord by the name of Darth Dramath, though her husband later found out about the true nature of Tenebrae's fatherhood, as he had no force sensitivity in his own genes to explain why Tenebrae was so powerful, and so he began to attack his wife for her infidelity. The young Tenebrae reached out with the force though, and snapped his neck. But to pay his mother back for being unfaithful, Tenebrae mentally tortured her for months on end before letting her die as well. Tenebrae would go on to conquer the northern continent of his home world, gaining a fanatic following of servants and spreading his reputation and new religion. Lord Dramath, after hearing rumors of this son, decided to go to the continent to see his biological spawn for himself, to see if he needed to be killed or if he could be made into a valuable servant. Dramath would get a wake-up call, however, as the 13-year-old Tenebrae stripped the Dark Lord of all of his power, and then drove him insane before murdering him as well. After this, Tenebrae consolidated all of his power on the planet, but in order to make his rule complete, he needed the official blessing from the ruling Dark Lord, Marka Ragnos, the most beloved Sith in history. Tenebrae would travel to the Sith capital world of Ziost. Here, he presented himself before Marka Ragnos, asking for rulership over Medrias to be officially recognized by the larger empire. Ragnos was greatly pleased when he first saw Tenebrae. At the time, he was only a preteen, with nothing but the coldest, evil black eyes. A boy who had managed to conquer his entire home planet and even killed a notable Sith Lord in Lord Dramath with relative ease. Tenebrae was a true prodigy. For most Sith, they would see Tenebrae as a threat to be eliminated immediately, but for the great and wise Marka Ragnos, the man who took enough risks to bring the Golden Age of the Sith to pass, saw nothing but opportunity in the boy. He denied Tenebrae's request to become his apprentice, as Ragnos was not foolish, and he saw nothing but pure ambition in the boy, something that was to be commended, but too close to home would be too much of a threat. Instead, he would publicly endorse Tenebrae, granting him rulership of his home planet, and dubbing him Lord Vitiate. Along with this though, Marka Ragnos gifted him many books and scrolls from his private collection. Ragnos was very interested in the boy's potential, and likely saw him as a candidate for the successor of the Empire, the next emperor. As a side note, the politics of the ancient Golden Age of the Sith Empire are fascinating. Marka Ragnos was impressed with Tenebrae, but he was no fool, and he realized he was too dangerous to be at his side. I absolutely love the small details about the Sith. But back to our story. 100 years would pass after he was deemed Vitiate, and Tenebrae would gain a great reputation of something of a reclusive scholar, a sharp contrast to other Sith conquerors. Vitiate spent a great deal of his time locked in his own palace, studying the dark side. Many Sith students would seek him out for knowledge, and Vitiate would openly welcome many students, teaching them to abandon restraint and to use the storm of the dark side. This was a relatively unheard of technique during these days, as Sith believed that the easiest way to power was unleashing one's rage. But Vitiate had a much more refined control of his power. He became so focused and potent that he didn't let it run wild within him. This was a technique that Sidious would later emulate. By internalizing and pressure cooking one's rage and hatred, the dark side became a thick storm, its power circulating within one's body, but not to be unleashed when the time was incorrect. Vitiate learned to master the dark side within himself, and when he chose, he would be an unstoppable geyser of the dark side. Just about everyone in the entire empire had heard tale of Vitiate and respected him a great deal. Vitiate even had admirers from the Dark Council. But what's compelling is Vitiate never participated in the politics of the wider Sith. He never joined the council and made himself self-sufficient on his own world, which had now been renamed to Nathema. 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the unthinkable would happen, and Marka Ragnos would die. After having ruled the Sith for hundreds of years, the Dark Lord would be one of the few to pass away peacefully of old age. Everyone in the Empire adored Ragnos, and no one was able to betray or murder him, even when he was old. A massive funeral procession was to be held for the deceased Dark Lord, when our next two candidates would make themselves known: Ludo Kresh and Naga Sadow. Both were members of the Dark Council directly under Ragnos, and both had been gunning for the position of the Dark Lord and Emperor as soon as they smelled that Ragnos was near death. So then, before the man's body was ever even cold, Sadow made his move. During his life, Naga Sadow had preached an expansionist philosophy, as he believed the only way for the Golden Age of the Sith to spread was to conquer more systems. Being so far removed from the rest of the galaxy stagnated the Sith Empire's economic growth and technological knowledge and advancement. And now, the old aristocracy had died off, only to be replaced by warriors consumed with quests of power. The old leaders of the Golden Age were gone, and it was time for a new generation to further the legacy and efforts of Marka Ragnos and to thrust the Sith into greater heights. However, the threat of all of this was the Republic, which lay in the main part of the galaxy. Until now, the Sith and the Republic had been coexisting in relative peace, mostly due to ignorance of one another. While the Republic had little plans of ever interacting with the Sith Empire, there was a growing sentiment of fear in the Empire of the Republic, and that the Republic was advancing their weaponry and technology and would one day plunder the Sith worlds. The shadow of the Republic loomed over the Sith Empire, which was why Ludo Kresh had a more conservative ideology. Kresh believed that things were fine as they were, and that to preserve the Golden Age meant to keep themselves away from the eyes of the Republic, living with what they already had made, not wanting to risk war with a greater enemy. Because of these opposing views, the two would-be emperors entered a fierce duel the moment Ragnos was laid to rest. But the duel was stopped by Marka Ragnos, who arose as a specter from his sarcophagus and commanded the fighting to cease. Ragnos said that the infighting would bring ruin to the Sith, as he openly pled with the Sith to not destroy what they had built. Unfortunately though, he didn't endorse either man, nor did Ragnos say which of the ideologies did he prefer, likely because his choice for the Dark Lord lay somewhere else, and we believe it was on the reclusive world of Nathema with Tenebrae. While all of this had been going on, Vitiate had openly distanced himself from Kresh and Sadow's political rivalry. He had no interest in whatever petty squalor was going on over there, and refused to make any statements on who he agreed with or endorsed. This was because he didn't agree with either. Tenebrae had his own plan, and Vitiate was actually playing the long game. He knew that Sadow and Kresh would destroy the old Sith Empire, and he wanted this to happen. It was all in his plans to remake the Sith into his image, which meant that the old had to be wiped away. Vitiate knew that he didn't need Marka Ragnos' worshippers, Sadow's followers, or any Kresh loyalists making up his empire. Vitiate wanted subjects devoted to him, just how he had on Nathema. So Vitiate watched from a distance as the victorious Naga Sadow became the Dark Lord and led an open campaign against the Republic, which would become known as the Great Hyperspace War. And because of this dramatic failure and the betrayal of Ludo Kresh, Naga Sadow's entire fleet was annihilated at the Battle of Korriban. Kresh's army fell soon after, as the Republic attacked him as well. And while Sadow did manage to escape with his slaves and live out the rest of his days on Yavin 4, none of the battle ultimately mattered. Vitiate had what he wanted. The Empire was at its lowest point, and ready for the crafting. In the wake of the defeat of the Sith Empire, Vitiate began making himself known, spreading a rhetoric of fear through transmissions, broadcasting speeches across the Empire. Vitiate described how the Jedi would destroy the Sith and massacre its people once they discovered they were still around, and Vitiate stoked the Empire's fear and carefully drove its people into a panic. This was aided when the Jedi invaded the Empire and destroyed any sacred Sith texts that they could find, as well as old artifacts. Assuming leadership, Vitiate called all remaining Sith Lords to Nathema, offering them aid in a ritual that he had discovered, promising that they would unleash the full power of the dark side beyond anything that they could imagine. While this technically was not a lie, it definitely wasn't what the other Sith expected. At the same time, Vitiate had his own researchers attempting to locate the world of Dromund Kaas, one of the Sith Empire's original colonies. This was a place that had been lost to history, and Vitiate believed that this was the perfect hiding spot from the Jedi and the Republic. So now, Vitiate's plans were coming together. 8,000 Sith Lords arrived on Nathema for the ritual, but when they did, Vitiate dominated their minds and bound them to his will. He forced them to participate in a ritual that lasted 10 days, and upon its completion, all life on the surface of Nathema was annihilated, except for Vitiate. He absorbed the life force of an entire world, stripping the force from the very fabric of reality. He gained unimaginable power and immortality. At that moment, the man shed his identity as Vitiate and became simply known as the Emperor, a figure of immense power and wisdom in the eyes of the fellow Sith that managed to survive. He would blame the annihilation of Nathema on the Jedi and would take what remained of the Sith people and the Empire to Dromund Kaas to hide. There, he would rebuild the Empire in his own image. Nathema was unfortunately lost to history, never to be found until hundreds of years later. And Vitiate, or should we say the Sith Emperor, had done it. He had won the War of the Three Emperors and came out as the only survivor, though it would come at the cost of Marka Ragnos's Golden Age coming to an abrupt end. From the beginning, Vitiate cared very little about what Marka Ragnos wanted. He didn't worship the Dark Lord the same way that everyone else did, but he respected him and saw him as useful. Of course, Ragnos knew this, which is why he respected Vitiate more than any other member of the Sith Empire. Vitiate was not one to fawn all over the ground on which Marka Ragnos walked just to curry favor, and Ragnos appreciated this, which was likely why he saw fit to give Vitiate the title of Dark Lord and see what he would do with it. We do know, though, that the spirit of Marka Ragnos was ultimately very displeased that Vitiate let the Golden Age die, as 1,000 years after this, the spirit of Ragnos would appear to Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma, dubbing them heirs to the Sith Empire. Marka Ragnos would task them with bringing back the Golden Age of the Sith, apparently having given up on whatever Vitiate was doing in unknown space. Even though Ragnos respected Vitiate for his power and ambition, the boy prodigy had ultimately destroyed Marka Ragnos's dream. But this now brings up a fascinating topic. Let's just say that Exar Kun succeeded in destroying the Republic and taking down the Jedi. In a world where the Golden Empire of the Sith was reborn, he would eventually be forced to deal with the rival Emperor, which was Vitiate's reconstituted Sith. This would pit Exar Kun against Darth Vitiate, and more than likely, Valkorion with the Eternal Empire after this. Imagine a reality where these two Sith Titans actually went head to head for rulership of an empire. But that was how Vitiate won the War of Three Emperors and became the true successor of Marka Ragnos's empire. So my friends, today's question to you is this. Do you think Vitiate's way was ultimately the best insurance for the survival of the Sith? Or do you think he should have used his power and knowledge to preserve this golden era? And if you had political sway in the Sith Empire at this time, would you have backed Ludo Kresh, Naga Sadow, or Vitiate? And finally, in a universe where Exar Kun succeeded, what do you think would happen when these two mighty Sith empires clashed? We can't wait to hear your takes on this in the comments down below. And as always, we look forward to seeing your discussion surrounding the lore that we broke down today. As always, my friends, thank you so much for joining us at the archives yet again, and I hope you're having a great day.